Alright, guys. Today I'm going to review Misbehaving. The Making of Behavioral Economics by Richard H. Thaler, best-selling co-author of Nudge. So this book, Misbehaving, it's a book all about the history of behavioral economics, and really it's the history of behavioral economics is the history of kind of mainstream economics from like the 70s to the modern era. Because what happened was there was this classical economic model that assumed humans were really rational and that we always made, these perfectly consistent rational choices based on the expected utility we would get from products, and we were, discounting future utility of objects. And they assume that people are doing all this math, and because of that, they can back into all these interesting answers about how much people value different things. But what psychology found, and people testing these theories in the field, they found that humans exhibit a lot of biases, and they have all these cognitive issues, and in certain situations will reliably be inaccurate or will misjudge things. And behavioral economics was this branch of economics that tried to take these psychology findings, these psychological things, the cognitive biases, and push that into the mainstream of economics. And so behavioral economics started back in like the 70s is when the research started, and that's when Misbehaving starts. The author, Richard Thaler, he was an economist, and he was there at the beginning with Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, another book on cognitive biases. But Richard Thaler interacted with these guys early in his career. So Daniel Kahneman, they were doing this research on decision making, but they weren't really related to economics at all. And then Richard Thaler learned about their research while studying economics, and then really devoted most of his career into kind of combining the two fields. And this book tells that story, and I thought Misbehaving was extremely interesting to read. Richard Thaler, I think, is a much better author than Daniel Kahneman or even Dan Ariely. This book really, there's a consistent narrative. It follows his career, and I just found myself getting really absorbed in the book, even though the story isn't that dramatic or... there's nothing too gripping about the story if you were to read like a summary of it on paper, but when he tells the story, just the interaction of people and, the different problems they encounter with thinking through these issues and creating new theories, like all of that, it turned out to be really interesting. And I think this book is my favorite book on cognitive biases, though I will say this book, like half of the book is about economics. And if you're not interested in economics or you haven't read a lot on economics, half this book is probably going to miss you, because a lot of it is pretty, they're talking about some minutia of some economic theories. And if that's not your thing, then this might not be the best book for you. But I love that stuff. And then the stuff on the cognitive biases is good as well. But together, I just really enjoyed this book. Is the easiest book to read out of all the other books on cognitive biases. This one, it just grips you and it brings you in and you want to keep reading it. And the others weren't that way. Thinking Fast and Slow is dry and it's kind of tedious to get through, but there's a lot of information. And Dan Ariely's books, they're interesting, but they're kind of surface level and they don't really work together as a whole. It's just a series of interesting research ideas that the guy had. This book is much more comprehensive. It lays a foundation for some of these biases we have, and then the second half of the book, it really integrates those ideas into economics and tells a lot of stories along the way. So I really like this book. I think if you're interested in the way people think, the way people behave, but also like economics, then this would be a really great book to read because it combines the two fields. I think people will really enjoy it if they like both of those fields. I think it's worth reading even if you just are interested in the cognitive biases aspect. Even though it talks a lot about economics, the book's so enjoyable to read, you'll probably still really like reading it. So it's not, the economics isn't a big burden on the book. It's just a lot of interesting tidbits and explanations that kind of integrate into a lot of economic theories. So definitely, if you're interested, pick this book up. I recommend it. It's one of my favorite books in this kind of area of cognitive biases, behavioral economics. I'm really glad I read it. It was better than I expected. So pick it up, give it a read, and I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you guys like this video. I've got more reviews coming soon, so stick around, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.